Right now, you're doing something you don't notice. Your eyes just moved. They jumped from one cluster of words to the next in a tiny, violent lurch, about 3 times per second. And during each of those jumps, you went blind. Not metaphorically, literally. Your brain shut off your visual feed for the duration of the movement, then stitched the image back together so seamlessly that you never registered the gap. You've been going blind and recovering hundreds of thousands of times a day, every day of your life, and you had no idea. That's not the strange part. The strange part is the same system that hides those gaps from you is the reason you can't tickle yourself. And understanding why changes what you think it means to perceive anything at all. The question sounds almost childish. Why can't you tickle yourself? Aristotle asked it. He didn't have a good answer. For most of recorded history, nobody did. Then in 1998, a neuroscientist named Sarah Jane Blakemore at University College London put people inside an fMRI scanner and had them experience 2 kinds of touch, a soft stimulus on the palm produced by their own hand, and the exact same stimulus produced by someone else. The scans showed something clean and undeniable. When the touch came from someone else, the somatosensory cortex lit up. When the subjects touched themselves in the exact same way, that activation was significantly muted. The brain was receiving the same physical input and choosing to turn the volume down. Blakemore traced the suppression to one structure, the cerebellum, that fist-sized knot of tissue at the base of your skull that most people think is only there for balance and coordination. She proposed that every time you decide to move, your cerebellum runs a prediction, a forecast of exactly what sensations that movement will produce, and then uses that prediction to cancel the expected sensation before you consciously feel it. You can't tickle yourself because your brain already knows what's coming. It deletes the surprise. But deleting surprise is only the beginning of what's happening. Blakemore wanted to know how precise this prediction system actually was, so she built a contraption, essentially 2 linked robotic arms. You moved one arm with your right hand, and the second arm delivered a touch to your left palm. When the system was synchronized, 0 delay, a perfect mirror, subjects reported virtually no ticklish sensation. Their brains treated the touch as self-produced, even though a machine delivered it. Then Blakemore introduced delays, 100 milliseconds, 200, 300. And something eerie happened. The ticklishness came back. As the delay between the subject's movement and the resulting touch increased, the sensation climbed steadily. At 200 milliseconds of lag, the touch felt almost as ticklish as if a stranger had done it. Your cerebellum's prediction had a shelf life. If reality arrived just a fifth of a second later than expected, the prediction expired, the cancellation failed, and suddenly you could feel something your brain had been suppressing moments before. Think about what that means. Your brain is running a real-time simulation of the future, a continuous millisecond resolution forecast of what your body is about to feel, and comparing that simulation to incoming sensory data. When the match is close, the sensation gets erased from your awareness. When the match is off, even slightly, the sensation breaks through. You are not experiencing the raw world. You're experiencing the difference between what your brain predicted and what actually happened. Neuroscientists call this a prediction error, and it's not just happening with touch. Every time your eyes make one of those tiny jumps, saccades, roughly 150,000 per day, your brain predicts the blur that will result and cancels it. That's why the world doesn't smear when you look around a room. Every time you speak, your auditory cortex dampens the sound of your own voice, which is why your voice sounds unfamiliar on a recording. You've never actually heard it at full intensity. Every time you walk and your foot strikes the ground, the expected jolt gets filtered out so your brain can focus on unexpected signals, a loose stone, a wet patch, a step that wasn't where you thought it was. Your entire sensory life is a filtered document. The filter is prediction. And anything your brain successfully predicts essentially becomes invisible to you. The philosopher Andy Clark, in his 2015 book, Surfing Uncertainty from Oxford University Press, argues that this isn't a quirk of the brain, it's the entire operating principle. The brain, Clark proposes, is fundamentally a prediction engine. It doesn't passively receive information from the world and build a picture. It actively projects a model of the world outward and then only pays attention to the errors, the places where reality deviates from the forecast. Perception, in this framework, isn't observation. It's controlled hallucination. Your brain is hallucinating your reality at every moment, and the hallucination is so accurate, so constantly updated by error signals, that you mistake it for direct contact with the world. The only time you catch a glimpse of the machinery is when a prediction fails. A friend grabs your arm and you jump. A step is missing in the dark. A word comes out of your mouth that your brain didn't script. But here is where it gets personal. In the year 2000, Blakemore published a second study, this time in the journal Psychological Medicine. She tested the tickle response in 3 groups: healthy controls, patients with depression or bipolar disorder, and patients diagnosed with schizophrenia. Specifically, she was looking at patients who experienced auditory hallucinations, hearing voices, and what clinicians call passivity experiences, the sensation that an outside force is controlling your thoughts or movements. Normal controls and the non-hallucinating psychiatric patients all showed the expected pattern. Self-produced touch felt less ticklish than external touch. Their prediction systems were intact. But the patients with hallucinations and passivity experiences were different. For them, self-produced touch felt just as intense, just as ticklish, as touch from the experimenter. Their cerebellum's prediction system was degraded. They could tickle themselves. That finding cracked open something much larger than tickling. Chris Frith, Blakemore's collaborator and one of the architects of the self-monitoring model of schizophrenia, had proposed that hallucinations arise when the brain fails to tag its own internal activity as self-generated. If your prediction system works, you think a thought and your brain labels it. That's yours. You generate an internal voice and your brain mutes it, the same way it mutes the sound of your own speech. But if the prediction fails, if the efference copy, that internal carbon copy of the motor command, doesn't arrive at the comparator in time, then your own inner voice arrives in consciousness untagged, unlabeled. And because it doesn't carry the signature of self-production, you experience it the way you'd experience someone else's voice. You hear it as external. You hear it as real. So the same system that keeps you from tickling yourself is the system that keeps you from hearing your own thoughts as someone else's voice. The inability to tickle yourself is not a quirk. It is evidence that your brain knows the difference between you and everything else. And that difference is not a fixed boundary. It's a computation that runs in real time, millions of times per second. And it can break. In 2016, a team led by Anne-Laure Lemaitre at a French university tested whether this breakdown existed on a spectrum. She screened nearly 400 healthy students with no psychiatric diagnoses and selected those who scored highest and lowest on the schizotypal personality questionnaire, a measure of schizophrenia-adjacent traits like unusual perceptual experiences and mild paranoia. She found that the high schizotypy students could tickle themselves significantly more than the low schizotypy students. The prediction system wasn't binary, broken or intact. It existed on a continuum. The further you sat toward the schizotypal end of normal human variation, the more porous the boundary between self-produced and externally produced sensation became. Sit with that for a moment. Your sense of being a single, bounded self, the feeling that your thoughts are yours, your movements are yours, your experience belongs to you, is not a philosophical given. It's a product of your cerebellum running predictions fast enough and accurately enough to tag every sensation with an origin label. The feeling of being you isn't something you have. It's something your brain manufactures, millisecond by millisecond, by comparing what it expects to what arrives. When you reach for your coffee tomorrow morning and your hand closes around the warm ceramic, you will feel the heat and the weight and the texture, and none of it will surprise you because your brain already simulated the contact before your fingers arrived. That entire experience, so solid, so obviously real, is a prediction that happened to be correct. You will hold the cup and feel the world pressing back against your hand. You won't feel the immense, silent labor of the organ that built that feeling a fraction of a second before it existed. The warmth will feel simple, immediate, yours. Every sensation you have ever trusted was a guess that turned out right. And the you that does the trusting is another guess, one that hasn't been wrong yet.